Hey folks, Zach Osterman, Mike Niziolek, Indianapolis Star, Bloomington Herald-Times, Purdue 79, Indiana 59. Mike, I think broadly speaking, sort of like what you probably expected from this game. I think Purdue was a 17.5 point favorite, so it's not surprising to kind of see this game go the way that it went. I do think a couple things did stand out to me. Number one, for all of Indiana fans, sometimes understandable frustrations about the two big lineups. I think tonight's a reminder of the anchor they give you when you're Indiana, and this is one of the few teams that can kind of go size for size with IU. Gave Malik Renew a ton of trouble, and it sort of shows you where this team is offensively right now. They can't live without that post offense, and they couldn't tonight. And the other piece of it is, to win a game like this or even stay competitive in a game like this, because very few teams have in this building, you just got to make some unlikely shots. And Indiana didn't make any of them. They didn't make any threes in the first half. I don't think they really made a three, to be honest, while the game was really competitive at all. And just kind of how it goes.
Well, I think the thing that stands out, the final score was 20. Could have easily been 30 or 35. Purdue kind of was goofing around the last 4 minutes.
A little bit, yeah. And Indiana hit a lot of those threes late.
Shot,
yeah.
A couple. CJ Gunn, 13 points, 3 3-pointers, and most of this came kind of at the end of the game when things were just sort of out of hand. So this wasn't even as close as it probably looks on paper. Zach Osterman was dominant. He had 26 points, 13 rebounds, made 11 of 16 from the free throw line. Obviously, they struggled to defend him, no matter really what he did. They had all sorts of problems with Braden Smith, with 19 points and 15 of those in the first half. He talked, I guess, in the postgame about how he was surprised how open he was on the drives he had to the basket in the first half, that there was nobody sort of on defense when he got to the rim. Obviously, they just kind of struggled in all facets. And I think what's inside of the game was pretty stark, but not, fans didn't like to hear it. But he called them a damn good team in terms of Purdue, and Indiana's right now still a team trying to find itself.
Yeah, I think, the one thing I'd say, I guess, specifically about this game, and then I want to go bigger picture, is, the formula for Indiana last year, we've talked about it before, was that Edey was going to get his points, but it was about kind of containing his impact on everything else around him. And to be fair, a big difference between Purdue a year ago and Purdue now is that Purdue's gotten better at that. They shoot the ball better, they share the ball better, all those kinds of things. But Edey has 4 assists tonight. I think a lot of the reason Indiana was struggling to guard Braden Smith, to be fair, some of it was Gabe Cupps struggling, freshman in a tough environment. That's going to happen. But some of it was also that Indiana felt like it had to sort of lopside its defense so much toward Edey that when Smith was getting in those ball screen situations and he was getting downhill, there just wasn't that rotation. There wasn't kind of that sharpness and that ability to defend the space in a way that sort of not necessarily cut Edey off, but at least made it hard to kind of involve Edey in the action without just kind of making it too easy on Braden Smith. And, in Bloomington, it was Fletcher Lawyer behind the three-point line. There were a couple, Lance Jones hit, I think, one kind of timely three. Mason Gillis had that run where he just banged 2 or 3 in a row. But tonight it was, Edey goes for 26 and 13. I actually didn't think Indiana played horribly against him. He was 7 of 15 from the field. That's very inefficient by his standards. But it's more the idea that what Indiana had to do to even get Zach Edey to be a little bit inefficient opened something up for another player that Indiana just can't contain.
I don't know about that, because he had 6 offensive rebounds, so he was getting a lot of those misses himself, and he made, like I said, so many trips to the free throw line.
He was missing shots that I'm used to him making, kind of 6 feet.
Sure, but at the same time, he was getting the rebound and then making a second shot. So yeah. It's hard. It's not, they're not the first team to struggle against him. He's just a bigger physical presence than anybody they'll face. And he's, the refs, I saw a lot of complaining about kind of the officiating. And I think I think the officials just struggle to kind of call a game with somebody that size now, because they're so rare. How do you judge what's legitimate contact? I didn't think there were a ton of calls that were sort of, phantom.
You're wading into
dangerous waters.
This has been going on in the Big Ten for 3 years.
But I'll be honest. I just that's the way I saw it tonight. I didn't think that it was sort of gregarious the way the calls came.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so either, broadly speaking. And I think, Indiana just felt like a team that, it had that offensive confidence early, looked really sharp for about 5, 6, 7 minutes, and then just kind of once the shots stopped falling, it felt like they kind of knew that if they didn't just play out of their skin offensively, and that's been true of everybody. The only two teams that have really even like competed with Purdue, not to say two, but like Arizona, Alabama, Northwestern, Nebraska, all scored like at a high level. Scored.
And Indiana really hasn't
scored in the 80s. Yeah, I don't think Indiana scored 80 points against a high major team all year. The big picture, and then we'll wrap this up because it is late and we got to file and hit the road. The one thing I would say for the big picture is Indiana was sort of like there was this, and fair warning, this is like the lead into my story tonight, but there was this sort of like tone to a lot of the questions that Indiana got post-game of this, like almost sort of like a deflated finality of like, well, how's it, how tough is it here at the end to sort of accept what's become of this season, essentially. And both Mike Woodson and the two players we talked to, Trey Gallo and kel'el Ware, seemed kind of bemused by that. They were just kind of like, well, no, because this season's not over. There's still 7 more regular season games, and, there's what, 5 more weeks, I guess, if you include the bye week in the season. Obviously, you get the Big Ten tournament, whatever comes of that. Mike Woodson, on the one hand, said he didn't want to talk about the future. On the other, he said, we'll have to add some pieces. But I guess the overarching kind of theme, or the overarching sort of thing that we threw that was sort of Indiana saying, like, hey, like, we're still trying to get better. We're still trying to figure this out. And you may think that this is some sort of – no one was like, it doesn't matter that we didn't beat Purdue. But it was more kind of the idea of like, okay, but like we're still going to be back tomorrow. We're still going to go back and keep trying to get better and keep working. Yeah. And I think that when Mike Woodson is sort of facing those questions, paired to questions about like, well, what makes Purdue so good, and how do you get some of what Purdue has? Like he kind of got a question or two like that. I think it's sort of like a reminder of like, well, that they don't see it that way. They see it as tonight was frustrating. Tonight was not what we expect. But tomorrow we're going to come back and we're going to keep trying to get better because we're a young team, and they are. Ken Pom has them the youngest team in the Big Ten. And we're trying to get to a place where this sort of stuff doesn't happen anymore. So all we can do is just keep trying to improve.
Yeah, and Mike Woodson is not a big-term picture guy sort of in the moment, especially after a loss. And even sort of during the week when we get him on Zooms, he's not sort of willing to be like, well, here's the 10,000-foot view of
he's very much like he's very much an NBA coach in that respect. Like it's very much just like, no, like next game.
Maybe during the offseason he would talk more sort of globally, like big picture. But he's not
globally.
Like the global.
Mike Woodson zooming in from like Barcelona and Tokyo.
Not he's global. Not he's.
We could go global. We could all do Zooms.
Might be on vacation, but I just think he's unwilling to sort of give up on the season, unwilling to. But he doesn't want the players to do that too. Like it starts from the top, right? Like the minute you start being like, well, here's what we got to do next year. Well, then why is anybody checked in? So, I think that has to be the focus. He has a young team, so knowing that he has a young team, he can't let that sort of slip away. Look, they have 7 games here that they've got to try to win, whether it's just to get to the NIT or not. They all matter. They're all chances to get better because he's trying to use these as building blocks for next year. When he's hoping, he probably brings a lot of these faces back.
Indiana's got a bye week. They've actually got 8 days, so it's a bye week plus 1 between this and Northwestern, and then they will have 7 games remaining, 4 of them at home. I would argue probably their toughest remaining games, at least on paper, are at home. So it will be interesting to just see kind of what Indiana does with this week, what Indiana can sort of make of itself, and what Indiana can make of, kind of the rest of this season, and how it might, as you say, sort of tie into what needs to be done in the offseason, what's sort of the long-term foundation. I guess the idea that, like, even if this season is ultimately deemed a failure by the standards that Woodson and the players have, it can still have a positive long-term impact if there's no sort of, like, let's all just kind of go our separate ways.
I mean, Indiana, the women's team, Terry Moran credits that run in the NIT that they had for sort of giving them momentum and sort of being a building block for where they are now. So, I mean, there is value to sort of finishing out the season strong, making, whether it's a run of the Big Ten tournament, if that's possible, or the NIT or something, to sort of put that, to get that before the end of the season would be important for this team because we've said we have all these young faces.
We're not quitting on the season. We'll power
We'll
through.
be there.
We'll power through. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman for the Bloomington Herald-Times, the Indianapolis Star. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.